So this is the beginning in the studio piece with pastel with rubbing alcohol to get the underpainting done. Now this is the reference photo taken in early fall at Indian Creek. And then coming up is this is the plein air piece that I did on the spot. Those two items, the reference photo and the plein air piece, is what I use for the studio piece. These are the little pen and ink pieces that I did. Should have done them in the very beginning during the plein air, but it's always a good idea to do it before the studio piece. And another thing I find interesting is things are, in the reference photo, things are awfully squared off. Look at the squareness of this shape, and even this background information here. It's awfully squared off. Now, in my plein air piece that I did, I don't know if I didn't see the squared off part and changed it naturally, or if when I was actually looking at it, it was less squared off, because it has a nice kind of little movement here, and then this background is a little bit more of a V, and this part has a lot more movement to it, and this is more organic. So I think what it is I think that's the advantage of plein air. When I was actually there, I could see more into the shadows and see the shapes and emphasize the shapes that I like, rather than that reference photo of it being so square. So this is the thing that I'm going to be doing right away, is making the shapes on this larger piece here in the studio, make the shapes to be shapes that I am excited about. Because if you aren't excited about the underpainting, you're not going to get very far with the piece, because you'll keep following. You don't want to keep following the underpainting, fighting it. You go ahead and correct it now. That's part of the advantage of underpainting. You can easily correct it right now. People often ask me, where do you actually get started? Which part? I like to work on the lightness of the sky. That determines the light value. And I like to work on the point of interest. That's where my interest is. That's where I want the viewer's interest to go. And remember, with these underpaintings, just getting started, you can change the shape. If you need to change the shape, now's the time to do it, because you want to try to keep the strokes fresh, so change now. As you start blocking in the main colors that you want to use, keep the point of interest in mind, and know that the strongest value change between dark and light will become the point of interest. It's always a challenge to keep your strokes fresh. So I've been known to do something more than once, because you learn from the first time through. In this case, as I review these images, the strokes on the left side, which are darker, what I want it to be, than the bush on the right. I think I probably should not have messed with that side on the left side, that bush, quite as much. But pastel's correctable. I can go back and change it. Okay, so far, it's probably about 3/4 of the way done for sure. This is the one I'm working on now. This is the plein air piece. The design is similar to what I had figured out with my little thumbnail. I want this to be the dominant area, this to be the point of interest. This is the secondary, go back into the creek, back into the dark area. And this part and this part is the least important part. So I want to kind of minimize it. Now in the plein air piece, the sun was shining very strongly on this little group of trees here. But what I remember of the day, I was really attracted to the way the sun was illuminating this section of these trees. So if I make this part as strong as this part, then your eye's just going to jump back and forth between these two items, and this needs to be the point of interest. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is this point of interest is really close to the middle, but it's not totally in the middle. anytime you put something really close to the middle, it really makes it an important point of interest. The next thing I need to do is I need to deal with the reflections. This part needs to be definitely darker. Reflections of a light area need to be darker. Reflections of a dark area need to be lighter. That way your reflection, the value of it becomes more compressed than what you see up above. Now, true, in some of your reference photos, it may look like a mirror image, but that's why plein air is so helpful, so you can really see it with your eye and not depend on what the camera does. I think this one's just about where I want it to be. It's always a good idea to let your painting rest for a while. You know, go out of the room, come back and look at it, maybe look at it. I might look at it tonight when the light is darker. That way you can see value better. I know in the reference photo you can see the reflections of the trees down here in the water, but I don't want the water to become an attraction point. I want the eye to stay right in this area. So I'm keeping this particularly light because that's what I remember of the day, that section of the trees when we were sitting there eating lunch and watching the light, that part of the trees, they just kind of glowed. And so I added also a little more light up here because I didn't want the lightness, that color, to be just in one spot. So I wanted to move it around a little bit. And I think I'll just, another thing, the reference photo has the sky blasted out because cameras do that. And I remember when we were there, the sky had quite a bit of color to it because it was a good fresh air, a high from Canada. Love Canada. Always sends us nice fresh air. And so I remember the sky having quite a bit of color in it. So I'm going to leave it the way my memory and the way the reference photo, or the plein air piece, had it. Pastels are easy to keep on tweaking. The one thing that I wanted to point out is in the plein air piece, I've got the woods awfully dark, and I want to give people the idea that they can kind of meander back along this creek bank and go back into this dark woods, but not have it ominous looking. So in the studio piece, I lightened up the woods, even put a little bit of a shadowy kind of orange back in here, lightened up the tops of the trees a little bit. And I tweaked this shape just a little bit because these sides were almost equal. When you're working on art, it's just color and shapes and value. So you have to continue to evaluate your shapes and see if the shapes are what you want. It's always important to make sure you haven't put some kind of a strange face in the piece. And actually, I've got something's going on right here. I'm probably going to tweak just a little bit more. Kind of looks right now, it looks like two eyeballs looking at me and a little nose. So I'm going to go back into that a bit. This shape is kind of just almost the same color. It's kind of a rectangle there. It's kind of boring. I might break that up just a little bit. But, you know, the more you mess with it, it loses its vitality, which is one of the reasons that I still really love plein air. Even if it doesn't produce something that I want to put in a frame, it gives me a whole lot of information. Now, one of the things I did with the plein air is I added this little color of the ripples of the water moving, which I left off of this one because, again, I don't want the water to be an important part of the painting. And even in the reference photo, you really can't see those little ripples, although you can, if you blow up the reference photo, you can see it like right there. So I hope you enjoyed the creation of Indian Creek. It was plein air and reference photo into the studio piece. And feel free to paint along because that's what I make these videos for, so that you can kind of paint along with me if you want to. We've got so many gorgeous places in Kentucky, I like to share them. The photo of the final piece here is a little misleading because it makes the bushes on the left seem the same value as the bush point of interest bush on the right. In reality, they're a little different. I had to add those little floating leaves. Just make sure that your floating leaves have some rhythm to them so that they aren't all kind of stacked up like someone is directing them. So like I said, that's one thing about pastel. You can always keep on messing with it. And as I was reviewing it for the video, I saw that this bush seemed to be too bright, particularly in the photos in the video. So I calmed this down. I added some kind of a copper color here so that this area was calmed down. It's not nearly as much of contrast. Point of interest, that is right there. And this color against this bluish kind of almost purpley color of the wood. So it's nice complementary colors there. This part and this part is the least important. So maybe now it's done.